Shocking. The palace froze when a royal guard exposed Queen Camilla's secret plan to replace the young heirs. What began as whispers behind locked doors turned into a storm that shook the throne itself. One guard's courage turned loyalty into legend, and the truth into history. Watch till the end. You will not believe how it ends. Hit like, comment, and subscribe for more shocking royal stories. The corridors outside Buckingham Palace's green antechamber were still as a tomb that morning. No echo of heels, no murmured protocol, no familiar rhythm of royal life. Just an unnatural silence, humming low through the marble, the kind that whispered something was being hidden. Sergeant Rowan Aninsley, veteran of 15 years in the Coldstream Guards, knew the difference between order and orchestration. Today felt like the latter. His orders were vague. Her Majesty's private review. Attendance restricted, no clearance logs, no household staff. No visible chain of command. Rowan had been stationed at the eastern corridor for over an hour when the first arrivals appeared. They were not palace officials, nor royal aides from William's or Anne's offices. The name tags clipped to their coats told another story. Shand, Lopez, Fellows. Family names that belonged not to the heirs of Windsor, but to Camilla's own bloodline. He stiffened. Those surnames were not supposed to appear on royal briefing schedules. Not here. Not now. A tall woman approached first, heels clicking on marble, her pass flashing burgundy with a gold C monogram, the consort's seal, not the royal cipher. She nodded to the guard, then disappeared behind the double doors without a word. Behind her, a second group arrived, 2 legal advisors and an older man carrying a velvet-bound folder. Rowan glanced down discreetly as he passed. The lettering on the cover caught his eye. Youth Succession Portfolio, Draft 1. His brow tightened. Youth succession? There was no review scheduled for royal inheritance. Not while the king was alive, and certainly not without the Prince of Wales' approval. Something was wrong. From the opposite end of the corridor, Sergeant Evans, a junior guard from the library wing, approached and passed him a folded note. Command update, he whispered under his breath. Strange crowd for a Monday, sir. They said inheritance review. But William's office wasn't notified. Rowan didn't respond. He didn't need to. Both men had served long enough to recognize the smell of a quiet power play. When Evans disappeared back toward the West Hall, Rowan's eyes returned to the grand doors. Behind them, the murmuring had started. Low, deliberate voices. Too many for a private review. He shifted position slightly, aligning himself with the polished bronze vent beside the door. It wasn't regulation, but palace acoustics had a way of carrying whispers to those who cared to listen. Succession protocols are flexible under Amendment B, one male voice said. If ratified, the titles can pass through maternal bloodlines in absence of certified heir participation. Rowan froze. Maternal bloodlines, certified participation. Those phrases weren't part of any standing royal charter. He listened harder. Camilla's voice came next. Smooth, deliberate, dressed in calm authority. The king is recovering. The Commonwealth needs stability, and stability must come from continuity the public can trust. A pause. Then another voice, nervous, younger, female. Your Majesty, these adjustments would place the line of succession beyond the Wales household. The press, Camilla cut her off sharply. The press will follow what they are told. They always do. For a moment, the silence inside was worse than the words. Rowan's mind raced. Beyond the Wales household? That could only mean one thing. Bypassing Prince George. Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. He pressed closer. The edges of his gloves brushing the carved wood of the door. Another advisor spoke, his tone rehearsed. We've prepared alternate lineage models through House Shan's extended relatives. It would require minimal amendment to the Family Compact Act, and we have signatures ready if His Majesty's condition— Enough, Camilla interrupted. When it becomes necessary, the documents will be ready. Until then, not a word leaves this room. Rowan's chest tightened. The consort wasn't planning a symbolic adjustment. She was planning a replacement, one that would erase the heirs of William and Catherine from the crown's future without a single public announcement. He stepped back, forcing a slow breath. Protocol screamed at him to stay silent, to report through channels, to follow the chain of command. But he'd seen what silence did before, how it turned truth into rot. He could not stand by while a scheme unfolded that threatened the children the crown itself was sworn to protect. Rowan adjusted his hat, squared his shoulders, and without another thought, he opened the doors. The sound cut through the chamber like thunder. Heads turned. Papers froze mid-hand. Camilla's eyes snapped to him, her expression cold as glass. "Sergeant," she said sharply, "this is a closed review." "You are not authorized." He stepped forward, his voice firm, steady, and unshaken. "With respect, Your Majesty, the line of succession is not subject to private discussion, not without the Prince's counsel or the King's direct oversight." The advisors looked horrified. Camilla's jaw tightened. "You forget yourself, Sergeant. You are here to guard, not to govern." He met her gaze without flinching. "And yet, ma'am, if guarding means protecting what is sacred, then I am doing exactly that." A ripple of shock crossed the room. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Rowan placed his gloved hand on the folder labeled Youth Succession Portfolio and said quietly, "This document does not belong to this table." Camilla's voice turned to ice. "You will regret this interruption." He looked her in the eye. Not as much as the crown would regret silence. For a heartbeat, the entire chamber froze. No one dared to move. The thick velvet curtains at the windows barely stirred, but the tension in the air could have shattered glass. The advisors looked to Camilla for direction, their pens trembling over documents that suddenly felt radioactive. Sergeant Rowan Aninsley stood unwavering in the center of the room, framed by the open doors and a shaft of morning light that spilled across the polished floor. He hadn't drawn his weapon, hadn't raised his voice, but his presence alone was enough to make a room full of powerful people feel small. Camilla was the first to recover. "Sergeant," she said sharply, her tone a mixture of anger and command, "you are severely overstepping your position. This meeting concerns royal administrative protocols. It is not for your ears." Rowan took one slow step forward. "Then why, Your Majesty, are the heirs' names absent from every document on this table?" A stunned silence followed. One of the aides, a middle-aged man in an ash-gray suit, shifted nervously, trying to discreetly pull a folder out of view. Rowan's eyes caught the movement. He stepped forward and, before anyone could stop him, lifted the folder. Across its cover, in embossed lettering, were the words, "Alternate Lineage Framework." Camilla's eyes flared, but Rowan didn't stop. He flipped it open, and his breath caught at what he saw. Inside were lineage charts, drafted with legal precision, detailing a rewritten succession plan that diverted the crown's future through House Shand and the extended Bowles lineage. It wasn't speculation. It was premeditated policy. "This," he said quietly, holding the paper aloft, "is treason to the very oath sworn to the late Queen." Gasps rippled across the chamber. An elderly advisor rose to his feet, voice shaking. "Sergeant, you have no authority here." Rowan's reply was calm, almost too calm. "Authority was not what brought me here. Duty did." The man fell silent. Camilla stood, every inch of her posture regal, but her composure frayed. "You will leave this room immediately," she hissed. "You have no idea what you are interfering with." Rowan looked her dead in the eye. "I know exactly what I'm interfering with. A betrayal wrapped in paperwork." Her hand twitched toward the folder, but Rowan didn't move. "Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth," he continued, "entrusted this crown to her son, and through him, to the future heirs of Windsor. You think you can erase their names because they are too young to defend themselves?" Camilla's lips pressed into a thin line. "You are playing a dangerous game, Sergeant. Gods are not politicians. You stand here because you are loyal to command. That is your purpose." He stepped closer. "Then allow me to fulfill it, by reminding this palace what loyalty truly means." The words struck like a hammer against marble. Camilla turned sharply to her aides. "Seal this room! Now!" Two of the aides moved toward the doors, but Rowan's gloved hand shot up. "Anyone touches that door," he warned softly, "and this report goes straight to the King's private office." One of the aides hesitated, eyes darting to the crimson folder Rowan still held. He could see the royal insignia faintly watermarked beneath the altered seal. Whatever this was, it wasn't supposed to exist. Camilla's composure finally cracked. "Do you think Charles will believe you?" Do you think he'll side with a god over his queen? Rowan's tone didn't change. No, ma'am. I think he will side with the truth. Her voice dropped to a whisper, sharp as broken glass. You have no idea how fragile truth can be in this palace. Rowan met her glare evenly. Then perhaps it's time someone reminded it how to stand. The silence that followed felt endless. Outside the windows, the faint sound of bells from the chapel broke the moment. Rowan glanced at the nearest clock, 11 a.m. The king's morning council would be starting in 20 minutes, without another word. He placed the folder under his arm, turned sharply, and walked toward the door. Stop him! Camilla's voice cut through the room, but none of her aides moved. No one dared to stand between a royal guard and the truth he carried. Rowan reached the door and paused. Your Majesty, he said without turning, you once swore that your reign would honor legacy and protect what came before. If that still means anything, stop before this becomes something the crown can never erase. He left the chamber, the heavy doors closing behind him with a sound that echoed like the end of an era. As he marched down the corridor, his earpiece buzzed. Command, report status, came a voice through the line. It was Captain Wren, his direct superior. Rowan replied, voice steady. Command, I am en route to King's Council with material evidence of unauthorized succession alteration. There was a pause. Then, copy that, Sergeant. You're walking into fire. Rowan's hand tightened around the folder. Then let it burn. Better a fire than a lie. He turned the corner toward the Royal Council wing, boots striking the marble floor with military precision. Behind him, the corridors of Buckingham felt heavier, like the walls themselves were listening. By the time he reached the king's antechamber, the household guards had already been doubled. The whispers had spread. Something had happened. Something the monarchy wasn't ready to face. He looked down at the folder one last time, the seal of deceit pressed against the seal of truth, and took a deep breath. For the first time in his career, he was not following orders. He was rewriting them. The hallway leading to the King's Council chamber had never felt longer. Each step Sergeant Rowan Aninsley took echoed off marble and memory, carrying not just the sound of boots, but the weight of truth. In his hand, the crimson folder felt heavier than his rifle. Inside those pages lay the most dangerous secret in Buckingham Palace, the Queen Consort's plan to rewrite the royal bloodline. Outside the grand doors, 2 senior guards stood at attention. They recognized him instantly, but their eyes dropped to the sealed folder under his arm. It bore the mark of the consort's office, yet Rowan's badge of authority gleamed brighter. The elder of the two hesitated. Sergeant, what's your intent? Rowan's voice was steady. To protect the monarchy from itself. The guard stepped aside without another word. He entered. The chamber was drenched in gold light from the high-arched windows. Around the long mahogany table sat the King's Council, a small circle of the most trusted voices in the realm. Lord Chamberlain, Bishop of Canterbury, Chief Secretary, and the King himself seated at the head, his expression calm, but tired. King Charles III looked up as Rowan entered. Sergeant Aninsley, he said, surprised. You are far from your post. Rowan bowed deeply. Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty, but duty demanded I come. The Lord Chamberlain frowned. This is a confidential council, Sergeant. Guards are not... The King lifted a hand. Let him speak. Rowan stepped forward, laid the crimson folder on the table, and saluted. This, Your Majesty, is not part of your archives. It was created under unauthorized authority from the consort's office. Inside are succession proposals that remove your grandchildren from the direct line. A sharp murmur rippled through the room. The King's hand froze halfway to his teacup. Remove. My grandchildren? Yes, sire. Rowan's tone was calm but unyielding. The documents outline a transition of royal lineage through House Shand. They bear counterfeit seals of the royal archive, and forged witness signatures. Lord Chamberlain's face turned pale. The bishop crossed himself under his breath. Only the king remained motionless, though the tremor in his jaw betrayed what his heart already knew. Charles reached for the folder. "How did you come upon this?" Rowan met his gaze directly. "I was assigned corridor duty outside the green antechamber this morning. I overheard a discussion regarding these documents. I intervened to prevent their concealment." The king's fingers brushed the embossed cover. The gold monogram shimmered faintly in the light. Elegant, treacherous. "And the consort?" he asked quietly. Rowan hesitated. "She was present, sire, and she did not deny authorship." For a moment the chamber was silent, except for the distant hum of London traffic beyond the palace gates. Then Charles leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the folder like it contained the ghost of his late mother's crown. "You have done something few would dare, Sergeant," he said at last. "You've accused the Queen Consort of treachery within her own palace." Rowan straightened his posture. "I have accused no one, Your Majesty. I have delivered evidence. The truth will speak for itself." The king's lips curved into a faint, sorrowful smile. "You sound like her." Rowan blinked. "Her, sire?" "My mother," Charles said softly. "She believed that truth must never fear the throne. That those who serve silently often see more than those who rule." He opened the folder. Pages whispered like ghosts as he flipped through them. Altered decrees, lineage charts, a cover memo bearing Camilla's private seal. His face drained of color. The bishop broke the silence first. "Your Majesty, if this is accurate, the consort's actions undermine the very sanctity of royal inheritance. It cannot be ignored." Lord Chamberlain nodded grimly. "It must be contained at once." But the king did not respond immediately. His gaze lingered on a small handwritten note at the bottom of one page. The ink was hers, Camilla's unmistakable looping script. "A new beginning for the crown. My family deserves its place." He closed the folder slowly. "I never wanted this," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I wanted unity, not another wound." Rowan bowed his head. "Sire, the monarchy will survive wounds. It cannot survive deceit." Charles looked up, eyes hardening with resolve. "You're right, Sergeant. This palace has survived fire, rebellion, and war. It will survive this too." He stood, his authority returning like a tide. "Lord Chamberlain, summon the chief advisor." Quietly. "Bishop, prepare a formal letter of inquiry. Sergeant Aninsley." He paused. "You will deliver this folder directly to Windsor Archives for safekeeping." "No copies, no leaks," Rowan saluted. "Understood, Your Majesty." The king's expression softened, just slightly. "And Sergeant, thank you. You've reminded me what loyalty truly looks like." As Rowan turned to leave, Charles called out one last time, "Tell the captain of the guard to double the watch around the consort's residence, discreetly, until I decide what must be done." Rowan nodded once, then exited, closing the grand doors behind him. The moment they shut, the king sank back into his chair, the folder still before him. For the first time, the crown itself seemed heavier than the gold that adorned it. Outside in the corridor, Rowan exhaled. The truth had reached the king, but truth was never safe inside a palace. He knew that now. Somewhere behind him, beyond layers of marble and history, Queen Camilla would soon learn that her secret was no longer hers. And when she did, the palace would not hum. It would roar. Night fell hard over Buckingham Palace. The sky above London was a deep bruise of blue and silver, the kind of stillness that comes before thunder. Inside the palace, that silence had teeth. Every corridor felt tense. Every whisper sounded dangerous. The truth was out. Queen Camilla knew. When word reached her that Sergeant Rowan Aninsley had interrupted her private council and taken those forbidden documents to the king himself, something inside her cracked. Not with fear, but with fury. She had spent decades clawing her way from scandal to sovereignty, from the shadows of public judgment to the gilded chair beside the king. Now, one guard, one man in red and gold, had threatened to undo it all. Her reflection glared back from the mirror in her private chamber. "He thinks he can challenge me," she whispered to herself, voice sharp as a blade. "A soldier in uniform dares to cross a queen." Her chief aide, Lady Helena Roth, entered quietly. "Your Majesty, the council is already whispering. They say the king is preparing an internal inquiry. The Archbishop's office has been notified." Camilla's hands tightened on the edge of the vanity. "He's questioning me?" Helena hesitated. "He has seen the documents, ma'am. Camilla turned sharply. "Those documents were proposals, not plots. The monarchy must evolve, Helena. William's children are too young, too fragile for this world. The crown needs strength, not sentiment." Helena stepped closer, lowering her voice. "With respect, ma'am, the king does not see it that way. He feels betrayed." Camilla's jaw locked. Then he is forgetting what it means to rule. She moved to the window, staring down at the courtyard below. There, standing in the moonlight near the archway, was Rowan, unshaken, silent, watching. For a brief second, their eyes met through the glass, a flash of something electric, challenge, defiance, fate, passed between them. "Get me the royal liaison," she ordered. "And issue new access restrictions. That man is not to set foot within 50 feet of my quarters." Helena nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. But if the king has already ordered additional watch around your residence..." Camilla cut her off coldly. "Then we shall remind the king that even guards answer to the crown. And the crown still wears my name." By morning, the palace was a storm of quiet chaos. Rumors spread faster than the sunrise. Courtiers whispered about forged seals, the guards' defiance, and a coming confrontation that could shake the monarchy itself. Some said the king would suspend Camilla's public duties. Others claimed she was preparing a press statement to defend her reform vision. In the middle of it all, Sergeant Rowan Aninsley stood in the Windsor Hall of Records, surrounded by vaults of history. He was cataloguing the crimson folder into a sealed archive under direct command of the king. He had barely finished, signing the verification ledger when a voice echoed from the doorway. "Sergeant Aninsley," he turned. Standing there in a dark plum coat, her hair pinned perfectly beneath a silk veil, was Queen Camilla herself. Two aides flanked her, but she raised a hand, dismissing them. "Leave us." The aides hesitated, then backed away. The great doors shut. The echo of their closing sounded final. Camilla stepped forward, her heels sharp against the marble. "You've made quite the name for yourself," she said coolly. "The royal guard who thinks he can judge a queen." Rowan stood his ground. "My duty was to deliver what I found, ma'am. Nothing more." "Duty," she repeated, the word dripping with disdain. "You think that word protects you? You've humiliated me before my husband, before the crown. Do you understand what that means?" Rowan's voice stayed even. "I understand that truth should never need permission to exist." Her eyes narrowed. "You speak like a man who's never had to hold power." "Truth bends to perception, Sergeant. Always has. Always will," he met her gaze. "Not if people like me refuse to bend with it." For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them was electric, two forces of loyalty standing on opposite sides of a single truth. Then Camilla smiled. A cold, deliberate smile. "You think you've won. But let me tell you what will happen next. You'll be transferred to ceremonial service. Silent, spotless, forgotten. And the crown will remain exactly as I shape it. Because people don't remember guards. They remember queens." Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "People remember courage too, ma'am. Especially when it wears red." Camilla's smile faltered for the first time. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your Majesty, the king saw the truth. You can't bury it. The people will know eventually. The more you hide, the louder it will echo. For a split second, something like doubt flashed in her eyes, but she crushed it instantly. "You may go," she said curtly, turning away. "You've served your purpose." He bowed slightly. "With respect, ma'am, I am not finished serving yet." He left her standing alone in that vast golden hall, the light from the stained glass falling over her face like fractured jewels. Beautiful, powerful, and haunted. When the door shut behind him, Camilla turned to the archive vault. The red folder was gone, locked away forever. Her reflection stared back from the glass display, a queen surrounded by history, but uncertain of her own. And in that moment, for the first time in her reign, Queen Camilla felt small, because for all her titles, all her power and all her plans, one silent guard had reminded her that crowns could be worn, but honor could never be replaced. The storm that the palace tried to contain finally broke, not with thunder, but with ink. By sunrise, the headlines were everywhere. Exclusive. Secret succession meeting inside Buckingham. Guard intervenes. Camilla's hidden plan to reform, the royal line exposed. Anonymous source, a palace scandal that could rewrite history. The front pages of every major paper gleamed with the same story, each one laced with speculation and outrage. No names were printed, but the details were unmistakable. A meeting in the Green Antechamber, forged documents, a royal guard's defiance. The truth was out. Inside Buckingham Palace, chaos replaced ceremony. Phones rang endlessly. Advisors sprinted down corridors. Public relations officers worked through the night drafting statements that said everything and nothing at once. But through the noise, one voice cut deeper than all others. The king's. King Charles III stood at the window of his private study, eyes fixed on the reporters gathering outside the gates. His hands, once steady from years of holding reins and pens, now trembled faintly. "They've torn the roof off the house," he murmured. Lord Chamberlain stood beside him, pale with exhaustion. "We can still control the narrative, Your Majesty. We release a statement emphasizing loyalty, transparency, and your direct oversight. We deny—" The king raised a hand. "No denials. Not this time. Truth must stand on its own." Behind them, Sergeant Rowan Aninsley waited in silence, summoned for a debrief that felt more like judgment. His uniform was spotless, his posture unwavering, but his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. Charles turned slowly to face him. "You understand what your actions have caused, Sergeant?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Rowan replied firmly. "Order has been shaken, but deceit would have destroyed it." The king studied him for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he nodded once. "You've shown courage, but courage does not come without cost. You've placed yourself between the crown and its own reflection. That is a dangerous place to stand." "I'm not afraid of danger, sire," Rowan said. "Only silence," the king almost smiled. "You sound more like a priest than a soldier." "Maybe this palace needs both, Your Majesty." The chamberlain shifted uncomfortably. "Sire, we cannot let this narrative grow uncontrolled. The consort's office has requested a press address to clarify her position." Charles's expression hardened. "Clarify? Or twist?" He turned to Rowan. "You said she spoke of replacing the heirs." Rowan nodded. Her exact words were, "The monarchy must evolve beyond fragile heirs." She named her own relatives in the new framework. A low sigh filled the room. The king turned back toward the window. Outside, the noise of the crowd was growing. Reporters shouting, flashbulbs flickering. The world was watching a monarchy bleed. Meanwhile, in the royal apartments, Camilla stood before her communications advisor. The morning light touched her face, pale and drawn, yet her eyes burned with sharp defiance. "They've made me into a villain," she said coldly, scanning the papers spread before her. "Do they forget who built this stability while he hesitated? Who gave this palace a voice when all it had was ceremony?" Her aide tried to speak. "Ma'am, the king's silence speaks volumes. The public is rallying behind Prince William." Camilla slammed her hand on the table. "Of course they are. That's what they want. A new story, a younger face, a future free of memory. They forget I held this family together." Her gaze flicked to the television across the room. News channels playing the same footage, reporters shouting through the palace gates, the words Royal Guard scandal flashing across the ticker. "Who leaked it?" she whispered. "Who dared?" Her aide hesitated. "It could have come from anywhere, ma'am, but—" She trailed off. Camilla turned sharply. "But what?" "There are whispers that one of your aides may have cooperated with the council after the investigation began." For a long moment, Camilla said nothing. Then, in a voice that chilled the room, she said, "Find out who." By mid-afternoon, the palace was locked down. Every member of staff was ordered to remain on site until further notice. Internal communications were restricted. Guards rotated in silence. In the midst of it all, Rowan stood once more at his post beneath the eastern arch. His earpiece crackled. "Sergeant, report." He pressed a hand to his mic. "All quiet, command." A pause. "You're trending, sir," he almost laughed. "Trending?" "Yes, sir. The public has named you. They're calling you the Guard of Windsor. There's footage from the corridor, you walking into the chamber." Rowan frowned. "There were no cameras." "There were," the voice replied. "Security feed. Someone leaked it to the press." Rowan's pulse quickened. "Someone inside?" "Likely," command answered. "But whoever it was, the public's on your side." He looked toward the palace gates, where a crowd had gathered holding small flags. Not for the king, not for the queen, but for the idea of truth. A woman's voice broke through the crowd's hum. "That's him. That's the guard." He froze as cameras turned toward him. For the first time, the face beneath the bearskin wasn't just a symbol. It was a man, human and unshaken. Flash after flash erupted, and in that instant, Rowan realized the truth had escaped every wall, every title, every seal. It was no longer the king's secret. It belonged to the world. Inside, the king watched the live feed from the window, his guard standing silent, as thousands outside chanted one word, "Honor." He whispered quietly to himself, "Mother, I think you'd have liked him." The storm that started with whispers had turned into a public reckoning. By dawn, every screen in Britain was glowing with the same breaking headline: Buckingham Crisis, Royal Succession Dispute Confirmed. The monarchy, an institution built on silence, discipline and centuries of control, was now facing what no war, no scandal, and no rebellion had ever truly achieved: exposure. Inside the palace, the air was heavy with fear and history. Every servant, every aide, every soldier could feel it. Something irreversible had happened. Sergeant Rowan Aninsley stood outside the king's private chambers, the same red uniform that once symbolized obedience now representing truth. Behind the grand oak doors, the final decision of a reign was being written. The muffled voices inside grew sharper, echoing down the marble corridor. Then by silence, the doors opened. A private secretary stepped out, eyes lowered. "The king requests you, Sergeant." Rowan entered. King Charles III sat near the great fireplace, papers spread before him, reports, statements, drafts of what would soon become royal history. His face looked older than it had a week ago, carved by exhaustion and betrayal. "Sergeant Aninsley," the king said quietly. "Do you know why you're here?" Rowan straightened. "To stand for what was right, Your Majesty." Charles nodded slowly. "Yes, and because of that, the world now demands the truth." He motioned toward a live television screen in the corner. The BBC anchor's voice carried softly. "In a historic address expected later today, King Charles III will break his silence amid allegations of internal succession reform within Buckingham Palace." The king's eyes moved to the window, where the crowd beyond the gates had doubled. Thousands gathered, waving flags not of monarchy, but of solidarity. Signs read, "Honor before power," "The Guard spoke truth," and "Protect the heirs." Charles sighed deeply. "The people are not the enemy, Sergeant. They've simply remembered what the crown forgot, that honor is the only currency a king cannot print." He stood, slow but steady, and picked up a sealed document embossed with his royal crest. "This," he said, "is a decree. It restores the rightful heirs publicly and formally, beyond any interpretation. But there's more." Rowan's eyes followed the king's hand as he reached for another letter, this one unsealed, handwritten. The king's expression softened with a pain only time could forge. "This," he said, "is my farewell to the queen consort." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Rowan said carefully, "Your Majesty." "You mean to remove her title?" Charles nodded once. "She chose ambition over trust, and I cannot allow the monarchy to serve itself when it should serve its people." He looked up, his voice suddenly stronger, firmer, the voice of a ruler reborn through hardship. "The truth will not destroy us, Sergeant. It will cleanse us." That evening, at exactly 7 p.m., the palace broadcast began. The royal seal flashed across screens worldwide before fading into the king's image. He sat at his desk beneath the great chandelier of the blue drawing room, his eyes calm yet resolute. "My fellow citizens," he began, "in recent days, truths have surfaced within our household that have tested the very foundation of this monarchy. The crown has always been a symbol of unity, not of power but of service. It is in that spirit that I must speak plainly." He paused, letting the words breathe. "It has come to my attention that documents were prepared proposing changes to the royal succession, changes made without my consent or the consent of the council. These actions do not reflect the values of this monarchy, nor the memory of my late mother, whose reign embodied truth above all. Effective immediately, I have withdrawn all administrative authority from the Queen Consort and reinstated the rightful lineage of succession as defined by law and tradition. The future belongs to Prince William, and through him to his children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, and to the one who reminded us of our duty when silence seemed easier, Sergeant Rowan Aninsley, I extend not only my gratitude but my faith. The uniform you wear does not just guard these walls, it guards the soul of the nation." The broadcast ended in silence, and then applause erupted from crowds across the United Kingdom. Bells rang from Windsor to Westminster. People wept, cheered, and chanted one name, Rowan. Hours later, as the palace returned to an uneasy calm, Rowan stood on the terrace overlooking London. The wind tugged at his coat, carrying the faint sound of celebration from the city below. He did not smile. He did not speak, but for the first time he felt peace. Footsteps approached. It was the King's aide. "His Majesty sends word. You are to receive the Royal Medal of Integrity at the next ceremony. He also asks that you stay on as liaison between the Royal Guard and the Council." Rowan nodded. "Tell His Majesty my post remains the same. I'll serve where the truth needs guarding." As the aide departed, Rowan turned once more toward the horizon. The crown had survived its reckoning, not because of silence, but because one man refused to bow to it. In the end, power had bent, pride had fallen, but honor had stood tall. And in every echo that drifted through Buckingham's marble halls, one truth endured: kings rule kingdoms. But guards protect legacies. Watch till the end to see how one man's courage changed the crown forever. Drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe for more emotional and powerful true stories that remind us: power fades, but truth endures forever.